guys. Sorry about the roller skates. I just came from a meeting. And that wasn't the best thing that happened today. People ask me, what's it like to be at Google X? And it's not always this good, but this is a true story from this morning. 30 people in a room pitching their hearts out about a new potential moonshot. All the things that could go right, all the ways it could change the world. And I'm really into how do we break things as fast as possible? How do we find as quickly as possible why something won't work? Because if there's an Achilles heel, you're gonna find it out sometime. Would you rather find out your Achilles heel now or 5 years from now after you've spent tens of millions of dollars? I'd much rather find out about it now. So I was saying, okay, I'm sold, I'm excited. Let's talk about all the reasons it's not gonna work. And they were having a hard time getting into the spirit of that. And so I said, okay, I'll give you 3 choices. Between sharks, storms, and pirates, which is the most likely to cause this not to work? And they were thinking about it for a few minutes, for like 4 or 5 seconds. And then everyone in the room started laughing. Not because I was joking, but because it was so awesome that that was a reasonable set of 3 things in this particular case that might undermine this particular moonshot. So, I'm Astro. I oversee a part of Google called Google X, where we try to take moonshots. Moonshots are those things which have as their underpinning, at the very least, 3 basic elements. There has to be a huge problem with the world that we're trying to fix. There has to be some proposal for how we would fix that problem that's radical, not in the sense of being cool, but in the sense that it's been undertried or untried before. We don't want to go to a place that people have already heavily explored, because then if we're going to succeed, that means we're going to succeed because we're smarter than everyone else, or we work harder than everyone else, or we have more money than everyone else, and those are bad reasons to win. So there has to be this radical proposal for how we're going to solve these problems. And then the third thing is that there has to be some proposed technology path to get there. If it sounds like science fiction, that makes it sound good, but then there has to be some reason to believe that there's at least a chance of making this thing happen. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about micro moments as I conceive of them, just to get us a little bit onto the same page, and then I just would rather have a conversation with you. I think it'll be more fun than me giving my standard X spiel. But I was thinking on my way here about what micro moments are from my perspective. And what makes technology beautiful to me is when it's intelligent. And by intelligent, I don't mean like some kind of robotic Terminator thing coming at you. Have you ever been in front of one of those juice dispensers or coffee dispensers where they're different size cups, and you put the cup underneath and you press the button, and then all of a sudden you're not totally sure if the amount of stuff that's going to come out is actually more than the size of the cup that you put in? That is technology that is not intelligent. Like, that's a really basic example where if it knew just a tiny bit, it would add something meaningful to your life. You could put in whatever size cup you want, and it would put in the amount of stuff that was sized for your cup. That's actually not deep rocket science. That's totally doable. It hasn't been done in those machines, but it should be. On the other hand, when you use your anti-lock brakes in your car, you're not braking. I hope I'm not scaring anybody here, but you're sending a request to a robot with your foot. You're saying, here's how fast I'd like to stop. And the robot says, thank you for letting me know, I'll see what I can do. And then the robot does not just apply the brake pad to your wheel. The robot does that subject to the additional constraint that it doesn't want you to go into a skid. It wants you to keep rolling friction. So it kind of pumps that system to get you to brake as fast as you asked, no faster, but slower if necessary in order to keep this rolling friction. But you don't have to think that. You just slam on the brake. That is technology at its best. That is intelligent technology. When we're designing technology for people, all of us, I don't just mean technologists, I mean product designers and industrial designers and marketeers, when any of us think about the future of technology and how we can help real people, to aspire for technology to create that magic moment, not where you're interacting with cooler technology. The world does not need more cool technology. But to interact less with the technology because it is cool. That is, that it is hiding its complexity from you. It is putting you at ease. It is making you have to do less thinking. This is one of the best user interfaces in the world. It's one of the best pieces of technology in the world. It never runs out of batteries. It's pretty good, huh? It has no user interface. You don't notice it except when you stop using it. It's completely self-explanatory. That's how technology should feel. That's what a magic moment is. And that is not just the domain of artificial intelligence experts. All of us can be thinking about how technology can deliver that kind of thing in our lives. So, I'm going to keep going on my rants, but I'm open for questions. You're just going to let me go? All right, so while the first of you is getting up your nerve to ask the question, some of the stuff that's come out of Google X that you may know about, Google Glass, the self-driving cars. We built contact lenses that sense the glucose in your tear solution for diabetics. The airborne wind turbines that we've built for being able to produce electricity, hopefully cheaper than coal-fired or gas-fired power plants in the not-too-distant future. Loon, the stratospheric balloon project for bringing the internet to the other 4.5 billion people on the planet who currently have little or no internet access. Project Wing, this is a package delivery solution via self-flying vehicles. How many people have heard of at least 3 of those things I just named? All right. We have a project in the construction and architecture space called Flux that we spun out a number of years ago. That's an independent business. We have a project which is called the Massive Neural Network Project. Some of you may have heard of deep learning. The first really massive neural network was built here at Google X, and was then moved into the central part of Google, what you would think of as search, but it facilitates turning signals into symbols for lots of different parts of the company now, for doing things like taking a picture and recognizing that there's a dog in the picture, or listening to the sound dog when you talk into your phone and turning that into the text dog. This massive neural network helps with those kind of things. You guys want me to give you a deep dive in 1 or 2? All right, first question, cool points.
Wonderful. The last time I saw you present, you were wearing Google Glass, which didn't have the features that you just described with the current spectacles you're wearing. What was the, you talked about Achilles heel when it came out. What was the Achilles heel for Google Glass, and did you find it as early as you would like to have?
Weirdly, there were a lot of Achilles heels to Google Glass. There are a lot of Achilles heels to lots of our projects, including every single one of the ones I just named. But I want to be clear before I describe 1 or 2 of the things that we failed at and the things that we discovered. Google Glass is not dead. I'm not sure, it's more fun to talk about it as though it were dead, I guess, for the media. We've graduated from Google X to Tony Fadell's part of the organization, and the job of Google X is to discover all of the Achilles heels as fast as we can. So one of the mistakes that we made at Google X as we were exploring what Google Glass should be when it grew up was we got people to think of it, in our excitement for people to use it so we could learn, to think of it as a product. It was never a finished product. It wasn't intended to be a finished product. Of course, it had to be done enough that we could ask people to help us learn what it wanted to be when it grew up, but they then became, they felt entitled, maybe reasonably so, to see it as a product and be frustrated that it wasn't delivering for them as a product. But it hadn't been finished as a product because the goal of productization is not learning. The goal that we were embarked on during that time was to understand as deeply as possible what the sort of real purpose of something worn on the head should be. And so there were lots of mistakes, like in retrospect, I think we could have done a better job of signaling to people that it wasn't a finished product yet. But we also learned a lot about the fact that the audio was a bigger, more important aspect than we had thought before. And there were lots of other things about the user interaction here on Google Glass for those of you who used it. It was really good in some ways. It was limiting in others. So there were a lot of things like that that we were taking copious notes on, metaphorically. I mean, literally, I guess. And all that learning has now gone on with the team to become what it will become. And many things like that. In the self-driving car world, just to use a different example, we had built several years ago and fielded, we were letting other Googlers who didn't work at Google X take home our cars and have them self-drive them to work. And it was not that our car, we were headed towards just launching now, almost 3 years ago now, as a product. But we didn't. Not because our cars didn't work, but because our Googlers, who I promise you are more responsible than the average consumer, and there were cameras watching these people all the time, and they'd signed documents saying that they were going to be super duper careful and keep their hands right by the wheel the whole time. They did not to put too fine a point on it, keep their hands right by the wheel the whole time. And that was sufficiently scary to us that we just stopped that and took a huge step back and have spent the last 2.5, almost 3 years building a car that literally does not have a steering wheel because that was an Achilles heel that we discovered in that process. Yeah?
Hi. So I think most of us are really good at finding everything that's wrong with an idea. And my experience is most people are incremental thinkers because when they envision the future, they do it based upon what they currently know. So how do you get people to think 10 times better? How do you get them to those big ideas before you tear them apart?
So you need to do both. You need to have sort of deep critical thinking, scathing paranoia. If you don't have that, if it's all like wild-eyed optimism, you're never going to go anywhere important. But you also need, as you're pointing out, to do the other thing, which is to say crazy things and go down the path far enough so that the one time in 1,000 when it's not crazy, when it's brilliant, you'll actually get far enough down the road to discover that. And I don't know any other way to do that than encourage people. And I don't just mean, hey guys, do more of that. That doesn't actually encourage people. What you have to do is when someone comes to you and says, what if? You have to take it seriously. And that's what I think it's quite hard for any organization to do. When someone says, could we harvest the power in an avalanche? If your first thought is, worse, if your first sentence to them is, that's a dumb idea, and it turns out it is a dumb idea, or it's not a successful idea, they'll feel bad for having said it to you, and then they won't say the next one to you. If you say, what a gorgeous idea, and I do believe genuinely that that is a gorgeous question. It turns out that the answer is no, let's not do that. But that doesn't mean that it's not a gorgeous, even after the fact, even knowing that it's the wrong thing to do, it's still a gorgeous question. I admire that person's brain. I want her to say more things like that to me. And we spent what was only probably 20 minutes, satisfied ourselves. There's quite a bit of energy in an avalanche, but you can't cause them on purpose, and you can't wait around for them, and you can't move stuff, even if there was an obvious way to convert all that potential energy and kinetic energy into a battery somehow. Like, how would you get it? It just doesn't work. But let's go through that process for minutes or hours or days or weeks, whatever it takes to throw out the idea. And occasionally the idea isn't thrown out, even weeks later, and then everyone gets excited about it. But that we take them seriously and we say genuinely that we admire the question because it's so novel, because it's so interesting. If you can get social cred from the people around you for saying things like that, miraculously, you'll start saying more things like that. That's, I think, what works. Yeah.
Hi. So you have one of the coolest jobs on the planet.
Thank you.
An incredible opportunity to make the world a better place. What are you most proud of achieving?
I know this is going to sound like a weird answer, but just yesterday, we closed down the biggest unannounced project that we've ever closed down. And I'm incredibly proud of that. The rate-limiting step, the work that the team did was fantastic. And it was working. It just was not going to be as great, as big, as soon as we wanted. And there's a huge opportunity cost to working on pretty good things. The rate-limiting step to innovation is not doing things if they're not really going to be innovative. And every company on the planet is littered with people. Every person in this room knows of a sizable project at your company that should stop tomorrow. You all know of one. I guarantee it. And it'll be going a month from now. It'll probably be going a year from now. And the reason it'll be going for a year from now is because people are scared of losing their jobs. They're scared of not getting their bonus. They're scared of losing their team. They're scared of having to go tell their spouse about this. They're scared of losing social cred in their organization. If you solve for those things, if you make it so that people actually work with you to end those things when they need to be ended, that's actually the hard bit. It's what opens up the space for the other stuff to come through. So I know it's a weird thing to be proud of, but that's actually the secret sauce. And so it's actually been a very emotional process. It took about 6 months from when it started to look like it till when it was officially closed, and I wish it could have been smaller. But everyone came along for the ride, and everyone feels good about it now. And that's actually short to do that from first glimmer to actually done, and everybody's doing something else and excited about it. So I'm really proud about that. Yeah?
Hi. 2 questions. One, you talked about huge problems to fix. Do you start by giving some sense of the different projects and the problems you identified to encourage the ideas? Are you open to them? And secondly, when do you scale the ones that are working? Because you talked about the diabetic contact lenses. I mean, that's an epidemic. There's 30 million diabetics in the US alone. It's an epidemic that's under control, out of control, and to a certain extent, it hasn't got intelligent technology that you've described. When do we see the results of these scale and come forward and become used by the patients and the practitioners?
So the first part of your question, I think the answer is we're open for almost all business. The internal joke at Google X is we'll work on anything but porn in the military. I'm sure there are other things we wouldn't work on, but that's the joke. What that means to say is that we don't want to constrain ourselves too much. So sometimes people come with a problem, like agriculture is insanely inefficient. How could we fix that? That's not a moonshot because that's not a proposal for how to fix it, but that's fine. It's good to start with problems. Sometimes people will come with something else about synthetic biology or nanotech and say, what could we do with this? That is also not a moonshot by itself, but that's also a legitimate place to start, and then we could say, what problems have people seen as unsolvable that this new technology might make solvable? So we don't mind where the solutions start from, whether they start from the problem, from the solution, whether they start from outside Google X, inside Google somewhere else, even outside Google overall. Any of those is okay. And then the scaling part, we're hoping to scale all of them as fast as we can such that there's never a point where you say, oh, now they're scaling it. And there's actually a very specific reason for this. If we're to cloak this whole thing that we're doing in mystery and wait till everything was done, whatever that means, and then pull it out and say, haha, we've changed the world, aren't you glad? No one will be glad. Because anytime the world changes meaningfully, there's anxiety produced with that. And by the way, I'm certain that we couldn't do it right by ourselves. So what we're doing is very non-traditional. Many years before we're done, we come out with something that's half-baked at best and say, here's this thing we're trying to do. What do you, the world, the public, what do you, regulators, what do you, the media, think about this? How could we do this better? Work with us on how we could do this better. We did this with the self-flying vehicles. We did this with the self-driving cars. We did this with the energy kites that we have. We did this with Project Loon. And all of these things are actually making progress at a good rate. We had cars that were a Lexus vehicle with a set of sensors that we bought from other people and computers that we bought from other people, and it was just our software. And then, very slowly, we made our own sensors, and we improved the computers so they were basically our own computers, and it was still a Lexus vehicle. We've now built our own cars, and we took all those computers and all of those sensors, and we put them on those cars, and now, recently, those cars that we've built and are designed to not have a steering wheel are on the roads in Mountain View, but with a temporary steering wheel in them. So there's never a point where people are like, whoa, that's a big switch, because now it's our cars, but it's the same sensors as before, it's the same software as before, it's the same computers as before. There's still a safety driver. We want it to be boring. By the time we take that safety driver out and it's driving without it, that safety driver should have been sitting there for days and days and days doing absolutely nothing, so that them not being in the car doesn't seem like a big deal. Project Loon has many balloons all over the world right now flying and doing tests, beaming internet to various parts of the world. They're tests, but there'll be more balloons in 6 months than there are now. And this isn't a sneaky plan, because I'm telling you about it. It's actually because we're trying to work with the world so that by the time we're done, everybody has been an architect of these solutions with us. And by the way, the contact lens, which you mentioned about diabetes, I think is a gorgeous example. We were not going to become a good company at producing billions of contact lenses a year or at distributing those contact lenses into hundreds of thousands of pharmacies around the world. That group has built a relationship with Novartis and their subsidiary Alcon, and Novartis and Alcon are going to take that technology to the market. And that's a good opportunity for Google, and in this case Novartis, together to do something that neither company was really going to get done by themselves.
So when you look at things like self-driving vehicle, which it seems like the biggest blocker for now will be regulatory, and things like, even the space elevator behind you, at what points do you stop asking can and should something be done and start asking may something be done? Like, how do you incorporate that into the process?
I think we're in the may something should be done from the very beginning, and regulators, I think, get a pretty bad rap, especially sometimes in Silicon Valley, and I think that's unfair. Our experience with them has been exceptionally good. We go to them early, and we go to them sincerely, and we say, here's what we're hoping to do, here's why it would be good, here's what we're doing to try to make it safe, what do you think, what would you suggest? And the regulators, and this is, the FDA and the FAA and the FCC and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration here in the United States, all of these really large, complex agencies have been really thoughtful. They haven't given us everything we want every time we've asked for it, but they've given us really good feedback. We've incorporated a lot of feedback. And so, again, because we're not waiting till the end and then needing to sort of punch our way through because our answer is so baked that we have to get a yes, by starting early on in that process, they can feel ownership of it with us. They can feel comfortable by the time we get there, wherever we end up in any of these things. So right now, we fly over many countries with our balloons. And we ask every one of them every time we fly a balloon over, may we fly over you? And it's so boring that after a while, they just say, send us an email. But that's success, right? When we get to that place where it's boring and we've done it in the right way, everybody's happy. And that's, I think, a reasonable way to go through this. I have time for like one or two more questions.
How do you think of recruiting and talent at Google X, and what's the right profile for someone who's willing to take risks like that, maybe work on something for a long time, and then have it be something you don't end up bringing to market, as well as sort of willing to take that kind of risk, potential high reward, potentially nothing?
So there's lots of things that we look for. Obviously, if we need an electrochemist to work on the contact lenses, we need someone who has some background in electrochemistry. So we are not totally deaf to issues of domain expertise. But more than anything, we look for, this is to this earlier question, a mix of open-mindedness and critical thinking. We look for people who are inherently makers of some kind, people who are empiricists, because it is in the nature of Google X to try to go quickly to something that is half done, get it in the world, have real experiences, real learning, and then learn from those and change your designs and go forward. People who are empiricists are going to fit better in Google X than people who want to sort of be first principles and just think and think and think till they have the perfect answer, build it once, and then they're done. My experience is that innovation tends not to work very well that way. We want mental diversity. That's a really big issue for us. We don't need another person who thinks like me or who thinks like any of the other people who are already at Google X. We need people who think differently. And so that's a combination of seeing what their minds are like and seeing what their backgrounds and experiences are like. So this is not just that we need people of color and women. We definitely need those. But we want anyone whose experiences are different because that will naturally pull us into these other places where we might not mentally have allowed ourselves to go, because we all have blinders on. It's very hard to remove our own blinders, but it's relatively speaking, easier to find ways to hire people who just happen to have different blinders than our blinders. And then create a culture where it's okay to call BS on the things that you just don't believe in.
How do you get fired from Google X? How do you get fired from Google X?
People who are jerks get fired. People who are bad listeners get fired. People who information hoard get fired. You know, as a total aside, fired sounds something like Donald Trump does. I would like to think of them as having been liberated, so that they can go you know. As a really serious aside, I believe that the whole concept of fired. I'm not dodging your question. It's an important question, but I think it's so important. Firing people is so frightening to the person who does it and the person who's receiving it that we avoid it for huge amounts of time. So I'm sorry, this is like not about innovation at all, but this is one of my soapboxes, so here it goes. Liberate them. You did not hire that person unless you believed they could be excellent. You are now considering firing them because you no longer believe they can be excellent. But almost all of those people can be excellent somewhere. They're just not being excellent with you. So tell that to them. You can be excellent somewhere. I believed that when I hired you, and I still believe that. You're not being excellent here, and that means this is not the right context for you. So you can't stay here, but I will work hard with you to find you a new place where you can be excellent. And I'm batting more than 50% people thanking me at some point, not always on the day, but so, you know, end of rant, but that process is a process of liberation. And if you pursue that as a process of liberation rather than as some kind of karate chop or bullet to the head, magical things will happen in your organization. Thank you.